This is Fourth Quarter Labs, where performance isn't just defined by what happens on game day, but by the discipline, mindset, and work that happens when no one's watching. I'm Robert Johnson, and here we talk to athletes, leaders, and everyday high performers chasing something more. Welcome to Fourth Quarter Labs. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are my own and do not reflect the views, positions, or policies of my employer, its affiliates, or any organizations with which I am associated. This podcast is produced independently and is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. Welcome to Fourth Quarter Labs. Today we have a great guest. Welcome, John Coombs, the founder and CEO of Rover.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
Of course. Excited to have you on today, John. We've been chatting off and on for a while about getting you on. It's great to finally connect on schedules and get you here. Had some technical difficulties even last time, but yet here we are nonetheless. So welcome to Fourth Quarter Labs, where we talk about sports, technology, business, and as we all know, building software technology companies is always easy, and it's always an overnight success, and anybody can do it, right?
That's right. These are some of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Battle stars getting there, right?
Exactly. I've chatted with you off and on. We've met and bumped into each other at a handful of conferences over the years, but I'd love to kind of start at the beginning, because I truly don't know how Rover started, where you're based, what you're focused on, and kind of what was the inception of Rover, and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, this can be a long story or a short story, but I'll give you the condensed version of where we started, and it wasn't intentionally in sport. So
Okay.
we started as, I would say, a non-sports business. My background, as well as my co-founders, was in sort of the consumer retail loyalty space. We were working in that market, and some location technologies had been launched by Apple around the time of our inception, about 13 years ago. And so we had basically built an initial product that helped, app publishers, app owners deliver location relevant content in the app. And that was really our V1 of the product, very much focused on the consumer journey at the time. The brick and mortar versus Amazon tech thing was quite the battle. And retailers were really looking to bring a lot of the digital experience that they were seeing happen in an e-commerce realm into brick and mortar, and some of the things that the app unlocked at the time could really help deliver that. So we built a product that allowed for retailers to delineate different marketing content and content depending on maybe which store, which location a consumer was.
Okay.
Where they were in. And it so happened that a lot of that location tech started to, through privacy and other things, started to kind of be declined and scaled back by Apple. It was also very logistically challenging to manage a lot of locations at scale. However, the one place that made a lot of sense was in a venue, one location, a lot of folks really, fans eager to engage with your content. And so we got inbounds from sports teams, and that's really where it all began.
I did not know any of the retail side. Are you
Yeah.
still doing a lot of the retail, or is that phased off?
No, really. I mean, some of it, but for the most part, no. We're really 99% focused on sports and live events.
And that's just because you loved it so much. Working with sports teams is just fun, or
Yeah, I think what happens is there's a lot of power in focus, right?
yeah.
And by focus, I would you can describe focus as a lot of things, but knowing your customer, knowing the nuances of their market, what
Mhm.
drives them, what their challenges are, and the list goes on, allows you to really build for a market, for an audience, for a specific customer, and trying to go broad. It has its own challenges. We've, I think, found success in sport by really focusing on the uniqueness of this category,
Mhm.
um, and solving the problems within it.
Interesting. I have to imagine I've worked at a couple companies in the past where we have pivoted based on market and industry trends, and made a huge pivot over COVID at one point at a previous company I was working at, and luckily um, to us that was a huge benefit. COVID was helpful, but how was that challenge shifting from the retail and brick and mortar focus to sports? Was that it feels like that must have been kind of scary, or like not really sure what was gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your comment earlier about how easy everything is,
Yeah.
there were moments, 10 years ago where we were, a month away from death, right? So you're kind of, you're
Yeah.
just, you're trying to find your value, your MVP is getting it to market, finding out who your customer is, finding that way to sort of, keep the business going and building on previous success. And yeah, that pivot was, a combination of luck, a combination of focus, a combination of a whole
Mhm.
host of things. But certainly, there were times when that retail market opportunity was on the decline, and Apple and Google were pulling back on some of the privacy, location permission stuff, which sort of changed the nature of the tech environment for us. Yeah, it was like we had to. We had a fire under our butts to get moving and to
Yeah.
solve it.
I'm sure you remember. Can you share who your first sports client was and what that process was like, or how excited you guys were?
Yeah, I think like it was either the Penguins or the Colts, and first of all, it's always exciting to have any inbound.
Yeah.
We know in the sales realm that that's kind of it happens, but not as much as you'd like it, right? You're often out there trying to get in front of customers and tell your story. But yeah, having some inbound interest and really just talking, having them bring to us almost the opportunity. And so again, they were doing location stuff. That's where we originated. So they were like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And we're like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's great. Like this matches. This is a great fit. I think the aha moment coming out of that, though, which really got the ball rolling, was a lot of teams were sort of saying, okay, this is what you allow us to do in terms of, fan content and messaging and things. This is great from a location perspective, but can we do this to every fan or to other segments of fans? Effectively saying, hey, we love your product. We'd like to be able to reach beyond just the location based content and expand the reach of how we connect with our fans. And that was a really, impactful moment that really kicked off, I would say, the broadening of what we do in the category.
Yeah. So a use case might be, I'm walking in as a fan. I scan in my ticket, and I might get a location based alert
Mm,
or message saying, well, welcome. I live in Denver, so welcome to Ball Arena.
yeah.
Enjoy the show. By the way, because you showed up an hour early, here's $1 off your first hot dog or beer or something. Like, is that the kind of content you're talking about?
Yeah, like a decade ago in our sort of MVP of an arena
Mhm.
experience, it was very much that, right? Like
Yeah.
welcome to the game based on location through the club app. Here's offers, here's what's on tonight, game day preview, that kind of thing. And that was sort of the first use case, was that in venue fan experience delivered through the club app and through the club brand. That was
Yeah.
really kind of use case number one.
And then now I'm just going out on a limb here. Now,
Yeah.
if I'm sitting at home and there's a Nuggets game on,
Mm.
but I'm in the app, it might what's give me an example. It might prompt me.
Yeah. I mean obviously, if you scan ahead from over a decade ago to now,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of expansion, right? So
Yeah.
if you look at Rover today, at a macro level, we're really about what we would call sort of post-purchase revenue acceleration, or
Okay.
how do we drive value and experience for the known fan? And by known fan, I mean a fan who's purchased a ticketing product or is known in the CRM.
Mhm.
So, there is, when you look at sort of the revenue opportunity within in sort of, ticketing and fan experience, you've got, the top of funnel, the sale of tickets, getting people into the venue. But then, how do you continue to drive that experience to make it, great as a season ticket member or a single game buyer? And
Yeah.
then how do we, continue to drive revenue opportunities for the club over time? So we're really focused on how do we drive revenue for the known fan. What that means is that's really about unlocking personalization at scale. And what does that mean? That means being able to deliver one-to-one content to a fan that's relevant to them in an automated way, so they don't have to do a lot to make that happen. And so what does that mean? That
Mhm.
means, season ticket member just signs up. They go through an onboarding experience that's automated. It might be, messages that are coming from their rep articulating benefits of their package, talking about theme nights and upcoming member events, communicating when their renewal is coming up, and doing that across SMS, across app, really mobile centric, in delivering that content. So it's really about, you know, data and activating on it, making it happen in an automated way to deliver personalized content to ultimately drive that experience, but also to drive revenue opportunities through upsells or renewals.
Yeah. I mean, that's exciting. I didn't realize that that was like the full breadth of the scale of what you guys are doing. So I appreciate that. Um, I feel like that is a lot, like your product is covering a lot of the essential, like, how do we connect? How do we stay in touch? How do we communicate? How do we
Mhm.
engage? Right. Because without a lot of that, I mean, that,
Yeah.
that, that's what the teams are trying to constantly do is stay in front of these teams, to just let, I don't know. Again, I'll use Denver here just because local. I mean, I go to one or two games a season, not a ton.
Hmm.
Two kids, busy wife, a busy
Yep.
life, all that stuff, and so going to many more is really not even an option.
Yep.
But your product is what's helping the Nuggets kind of stay in front of me from an engagement perspective.
Yeah, and do so scalably. As you know very well, sports is unique, for a number of reasons, but a few key ones that are relevant here are: one, pace of content, pace of change, pace
Yeah,
of, what's going on in the season; two, just general bandwidth for the team; and resource constraints. Teams are
yeah,
relatively resource constraints, which might surprise those outside of the industry, but for those in the industry, that's pretty well known. And, if you've got 80 plus games, you're going week in, week out, 3, 4 games a week, working late, you don't have a lot of time to deliver on this promise of a one-to-one fan experience or
yeah,
personalized, fan content. Those are narratives that exist in the market.
yeah,
But when it comes to executing them, it's quite difficult. It requires a lot of people, a lot of involvement, a lot of time. And so a lot of things don't happen. That's what we're addressing, is through deep data integration, journeys and automation, allowing for set it and forget it style one-to-one communication. So
I,
speaking to you about going to 2 games, maybe we can get you to third. Speaking to you saying, hey, we know you have kids, maybe you come to the kids theme night, that kind of thing. And
yeah.
doing that in an automated way, so somebody's not having to put the resources they don't have into doing that.
I have to imagine. I know this sounds cliche, but based on everything you just said, like I have to imagine the automation component. You guys have to be leveraging AI to how you guys are doing a lot of automated messaging, right? Or is it or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah, for sure. That's a component. I think the other one is kind of, you know, being able to automate personalization starts with good data, right? You can't personalize anything if you can't segment or know who an individual is, right? So foundationally, it's integrating with the relevant data sources to unlock the potential of personalization, right? So that means integrating with the ticketing providers and other data sources so that when it comes to wanting to activate on that data as a marketer or somebody in like the ticketing realm, you need to have visibility to it. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be real time, especially in the world of ticketing where tickets are transferred all the time. You need to have an accurate picture of who the fan is and what the conditions are. And then from there, you want to think about what are the what are the steps in the fan journey that would trigger content. So like in the case of a renewal campaign, it's like, okay, we know Robert, we know he's a season ticket member, we know when he's up for renewal, we know that he hasn't renewed yet. Those conditions are met in a sort of Rover created journey, and then
Yeah,
the messaging is automated when the appropriate conditions have been either met or not.
yeah. That is so cool. I love this type of technology. I mean, I've been in software technology for 22 years, trying to incorporate things like that, and even my day to day, right? But that's exciting. Where are you guys at right now in terms of market share?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so Definitely different ways to qualify that. I would say, our focus is North American sports, where we
Yeah,
have almost 70 professional North American sports teams in all the major leagues.
yeah,
I think we have very high penetration, and you can just do the numbers on that in
right,
terms of the professional sports ecosystem.
yeah,
Um, and, I think what's happening is teams are really looking for, I think, their vendors to do more for them,
hmm,
and have like fewer vendors. To be honest, I think we're kind of in this stage where there's a lot of products out there, and it's very difficult to manage. Going back to those resource constraints, so I think being able to provide more and do more with less is the name of the game in a lot of ways.
100%. Yeah. Um, shifting gears a little
Yeah.
bit. What are you seeing on the topic of, like, you just jogged my memory, like on the topic of a lot of products entering in the market, a lot of shifts, a lot of demand. You got low number of resources that are expected to do a lot with a little, and some of these teams. What are some of the maybe biggest shifts you're seeing in um, in the world of sports and technology, and what do you see the next 5 years of demand looking like in terms of like solving the business challenges?
Yeah, I think, there was a wave of technologies with the focus on kind of maybe content for content's sake, or just, doing things that seem interesting.
Yeah,
Well, I think there's obviously room for great opportunities to be interesting, right? To do things that your fans find interesting. I think increasingly there's an expectation that there's an ROI attached to that,
yeah,
and that's sometimes easier said than done in terms of how do you measure the value of an experience, etc. But there's definitely, I think, a movement afoot, and it makes sense, as there should be, that investments in software, investments of technology should yield some sort of some measurable result. And so I think that's put a lot of that's holding vendors to account, so to speak,
yeah,
in terms of making sure there's a deliverable, and that there's an impact there. And that's certainly like a common thing that's happening now. And then, like I mentioned, sort of consolidation of tech.
yeah,
Having 30 products on your desktop is just not manageable, I think, for a lot of folks. And so
yeah,
doing more with less, and more automation is definitely a trend.
yeah. John, what's your background? Are you a engineer, software developer, or marketer? Like, how did you back into launching Rover?
Yeah, I think I've always kind of been um entrepreneur at heart in terms of
Yeah,
starting businesses throughout college, and that kind of realm. So there's been that element to me. Also, very much always been in close to business development type roles,
yeah,
sales, market development type things. Um and then, yeah, like really kind of taking some of those skill sets, and wanting to solve problems, wanting to really,
yeah.
I really enjoy tackling hard things, and putting the component parts together to really solve, though that's sort of an intuitive thing within me that I've kind of applied throughout my life.
Was So I'll give you a little backdrop to my next question. So 6 years ago, I joke and say I accidentally started a company with a friend of mine, and it ended up turning into a real business, and we had employees and a couple $1 million in sales, and the whole thing was kind of like an accident, right? I knew like you, there was a piece of me that wanted to build something, wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I have other things that I do with real estate, and so I've got stuff like that going on all the time because I like it. Um, but do you feel like was Rover like intentional? Was this like, this is what I want to do? That I want to be a CEO. I want to be a leader, or were you more
Yeah.
like, what's behind John? Like, is it?
Yeah. Well, there's the degree to which all this was calculated, and then the degree to which
Yeah,
it kind of just happened as
yeah,
steps fell into place. And so, I like to say it was all calculated, but I think what ends up happening is, you have some innate, or sort of, characteristics that, drive you, inspire you, that sort of help guide you in everything you do. And then I think ideally, you have exposure to good people in good companies that help equip you with the tools to ultimately like make the decision to go out on your own. And, ideally like a problem or an opportunity really, grabs you and feels like it's something that you could really latch onto. And I think in my case, that's kind of how things happened, in the sense that I think a lot of the fundamental drive and interest was there. I think I got time in some other companies that exposed me to great people, great leaders, better understanding of, how to do things right or how not to do things. And then that sort of, was really kind of pushed forward with the recognition of an opportunity, something that I felt like I had a bit of an unfair advantage to achieve with the right people. And, and that's kind of what I would say, push that through.
Yeah. Based on where you're at in your journey in the season of life maybe that you're in, you've got Rover, it's up and running. You've got I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like you got a nice stable business. You've got good client base. You've been running the company. You built the company, running it for a couple of years now. Like, are you more focused on um, in your personal journey? Are you more focused on leadership, being a CEO? Is there an aspect of giving back, or like what is your uh, like what are you focused on right now as a leader, or where are you in your journey as just being a founder?
Yeah, I think I'm really focused on, from a business perspective, looking at how can we take what we do and continue to push the industry forward, right? I think, the reality of the market is such that, you know, teams need sort of an end to end, stack for fan engagement, which is comprised of a lot of component parts, which I won't necessarily get into now, but ultimately a command center for how we think about fan data, fan engagement, fan revenue acceleration. And that's a lofty stack and with many component parts. And so I'm really focused on, what do we build? How do we build it? And where do we partner to put together something that's industry leading? I think we've made a lot of progress in the last year or so, and for me, that's really a big part of what drives me, is getting to that spot where, you know the things we've heard from marketers and, people in ticketing and fans themselves, um you know are actually realized. I think we're close, and I'm really mission driven to get there. And that's because I'm really passionate about product, really passionate about this market, and solving a lot of the remaining problems that I think we can address. And of course, in doing that, we balance that with being, good citizens in our community, both in the sports ecosystem and how I personally can help those, looking to enter the market. And then also, with my kids, my family, I've got three kids, all in sports, and where I can, I'm pretty involved there in the community as well. So kind of balance both those things.
Yeah. um, when you're how do you balance like the focus of like where, so there's all these changing dynamics in sports, right? You've got the resources that you want to invest in, you've got the tech stack that you want to build out. Like, um, how are you guys picking and choosing which areas to focus on from a software development perspective, a product perspective? Like, um, are those are those being fed to you through the team's demands that they're putting on you guys, or is it through innovation that you guys think is going to differentiate you from the other competitors in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely starts with where I began, which is the sort of the customer obsession, and really spending a lot of times with customers to understand their challenges, their opportunities, what's being expected of them, what makes their life easier,
Yeah.
what makes their business successful. And so, in we as a business invest a lot of time in that, in terms of, through interdepartmentally and at all levels, having a lot of understanding of the customer, and the challenges and those opportunities. We spend a lot of time doing that, and then we, take those insights and we run them through a series of like themes that
Mm.
inspire how we build product. And, a lot of that is around, does this allow the team to do more with less? Or are we creating new work?
Mhm.
Does this have like a hard ROI or impact? Can this be set it and forget it kind of thing, or automated? Like,
Mhm.
these are the kind of things we think about when we take those opportunities. We need to make sure that we build them in a way where they're additive and they're not asking a team to do anything additionally. Like, that's big. Um, yeah. So don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, yeah. Again, being in software myself, there's always a focus of like, great, what features do we want? What features
Mhm.
are the sales team demanding of us?
Mhm.
How do they align um, with revenue, or how is it going to help drive revenue? How is it going to decrease costs? How is it going to improve um, um, process
Yeah.
or sorry, operations, right? In one of those three buckets, and that's always like um, there's always the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing
Yeah.
also, right? And so as you're thinking about those lofty goals of how you're going to build a business, how you're going to differentiate, how you're going to manage those requests, I feel like, it's a little bit of a gamble sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't want to build features just for feature's sake,
For
but
sure.
you're also trying to meet the demands of some of your most highest value clients some days,
Yep.
and that's not always like an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important to build structure into your product management processes to determine and value various forms of feedback, market insight, future opportunity, balancing vision, and direction with
Yep.
current realities, with current requests from customers. I think that's an area that, you know, we've gotten pretty good at, and certainly AI has played a major role in helping to, you know, helping to drive insights from a large corpus of customer data and feedback to help make the right decisions, and help build things efficiently and effectively. It's really helped us to be more productive as a product team,
Yeah.
in sort of sifting through all that.
I get the impression, just because I've seen you at so many conferences, John, that I get the impression that either A, you like to go to the conferences, or B, you're super hands on. Um, and some CEOs, I think, can easily take a back seat where they're going to let their team go to these things. And I know you have teammates that join you, but how do you see your role at Rover?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, when it comes to my management style, not less hands-on, to be honest. I think it's really important. We set objectives, we set goals. We're there always to unblock or support.
Yeah,
But ultimately, you hire people for a reason, so give them room, and that's certainly my style. As it relates to kind of my role and where I see myself, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's really important that we as a business are a understanding of the market, and b
yeah,
advocates for where it should go. And so I do spend a lot of time at these conferences talking to partners, understanding the ecosystem, getting sort of multi-departmental perspective on challenges and opportunities, which ultimately I should be able to synthesize and help use that to articulate our vision, our direction, within the market. So I think a lot of my presence at conferences is really sort of to do that, to be sort of both a two-way, both an ambassador for us and our vision and where we're going, but also
yeah.
to, ingest a lot of the sort of the feedback that comes from the market and our customers itself. And, you know, uh, see those as good opportunities to do that.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. Just having been to one, the sports industry is so small. I feel like in general it's hands on. It's great to be able to walk through some of these conferences and be able to really easily bump into 10 or 20 people that you work with, that you've seen in the past, build those relationships. And it's just kind of I feel like it's part of the nature of working in the industry is being able to do that and kind of have your finger on the pulse, whether you are really any role, customer success, product, CEO, obviously sales, those types of things allow you to kind of feel the temperature, when you have the opportunity to go to conferences and just chat with so many different people.
For sure. Yeah.
What? I'd like, if possible, I'd like to focus on, you mentioned like leadership style. Where did you, do you have, do you have mentors that you've leaned on? Are there people in your past that have helped kind of define your leadership style? And, or is this something that you feel like you've kind of grown into and it's been easy for you? I'm not implying that doing this is easy, but like, has it come naturally for you?
Um, I've always, looking back, in my past, I've always appreciated sort of clarity of objective and then room to achieve it, right? And so that's sort of simple model, I guess, is something that I gravitate towards, which is, make sure that I, both when I talk about the company or to the company or with any like reports, are like explicit and clear on sort of what it is we're trying to achieve. And we can have a discussion about that, but ultimately, let's land on some clarity of what success looks like, how we might measure that, right? And using that kind of a framework. Um, and then let me get out of your way, and then let's check in, right? Let's kind of observe, but um I'm here to unblock you, right? Like, I'm here to help if if I can be of assistance, but I really try and hire people who are better than me at what their respective task is, and I'm just kind of here to provide, direction and sort of top line objective setting, and then give them room to succeed and support them where they need it. And I think that style is something that's personally resonated with me,
Mhm.
um in my past. And so, I think that's kind of how I came to that.
Looking back on Rover, is there any like, are there any things that maybe you would have done differently, or maybe different industry shifts that you would have made? I mean, there are pros, but there's also cons to working in the world of sports. There's 10,000 manufacturing companies out there, but there's only a few hundred, pro sports teams, right?
Hmm.
A few hundred venues, as an example, right? There's tens of thousands of financial institutions out there, as well, or retailers. But you shifted out of retail and
Mm.
brick and mortar into sports. Are there any aha moments you look back at and you're like, man, I really wish we would have done this, or this would have been a great idea for Rover?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know maybe recognizing earlier that we were onto something in sports and going all
Yeah,
in on it faster, right? I think,
yeah, yeah,
you know, you don't, don't underestimate the value of a customer loving your product and coming to you and wanting to talk and wanting more, like that. That is really, a big foundation of ultimate success, because from that engagement, you can, build the right thing and, make customers happy. And in a market that is smaller, word of mouth is everything, right? And
yeah,
so you can't burn bridges, you can't do things the wrong way. You need to be have a good perception in the market in order to not just grow but to sustain. And so, well, it's not a regret. I think, certainly getting on to going all in on sports earlier,
yeah,
would have been beneficial. It's very difficult to try and tackle multiple markets at the same time, you know, given the size of the business. And so
yeah.
focusing earlier and really just recognizing that opportunity earlier, is something that, probably would have, wanted to do.
Do you see you pivoting back out of sports? Not like not leaving sports, but is there
Mm.
a secondary market that you see as your kind of your next big white whale?
Honestly, I don't think so at this particular time. I think there's a lot more to do in sports with a a
Mhm.
larger opportunity ahead of us than is behind us. And, that's
Yeah,
not just about new logos, that's also about, doing more for our customers,
yeah,
and growing through that. And I
yeah,
just see a lot of, yeah, a lot of near-term opportunity, and that's
mhm,
where we're focused.
yeah. I I used to work heavily in higher education. And so when I think of your product and all the use cases you talked about with loyalty and integration and mobile apps and engagement and how to engage people, like the world of higher education and like a college campus seems to me like a really interesting use case for your product to keep, because there's this one of the things that colleges try to do is they try to they know that if students obviously attend class, but also join groups and are engaged and go to on-campus activities, again, very similar to a venue setting. Like if you engage with a Toyota sponsorship, right? That's an activation.
Mhm.
So in the world of colleges, they know that if students do those things, they tend to have a higher graduation rate,
Mm.
as an example.
Yeah.
Um, or a higher success rate or better grades, things like that. So my mind like goes to higher education. Have you had any inbounds from them, or has that been a place of interest for you guys?
No, not as a category right now, other than we do work with some colleges in their sort of sports realm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think, like I said, there's a lot for us that lies ahead in sports and live events that,
yeah,
we need to have the discipline of staying focused on and not getting distracted um at this point in time. Now that's,
yeah.
that's the relative near term. That's not forever.
Gotcha. Yeah, always a lot of shiny objects out there. That's
For
probably one of the
sure.
biggest challenges of running a company and being in technology in general. There's always other use cases, and solutions or opportunities for your product out there. Um, What parting here, John? I know you got to run soon. Parting comments. Like I'd love to understand like what, for anybody listening to this podcast, anybody who's thinking about getting into sports and technology. I talked to a young gentleman yesterday, just interested in wanting to get into sports and technology. What are you excited about for the future of sports?
Yeah, I think the market's, broadly speaking, more exciting than ever before in a world of AI and things technology. The analog of what's happening on the field and the sort of the surprise and delight and the sort of peaks and valleys of fandom are probably going to be worth more than ever before. I'm very bullish on live events and sort of the category and what it can do for people and for from a market perspective. And so, you know, it's a growth market in that regard. I think there's going to be more money, more focus, more eyeballs, and more growth in the years to come, and that's great. You want to be in a growing industry, of course, and so
Yep.
that would be something that I would be pretty bullish on. And I think in terms of people's path to getting there, I think it's really important. You put in some time with a club or with a league or with a technology provider, or ideally both, and really sort of understand the different sides of the market and the different opportunities and where things are going. And then you know um, you can leverage those experiences, those relationships, and that in-depth inside understanding um, to participate in sort of the future, right? And whatever opportunities do emerge.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, John, thank you for the time. Thank you for joining Fourth Quarter Labs today, sharing a lot of interesting information about Rover, and yeah. So thanks, John. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Fourth Quarter Labs. If you enjoyed the conversation, please follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube so you never miss an episode. Your support helps us continue sharing stories and insights from leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, and high performers. We'll see you on the next episode.